Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining. It's a really big day for Traceable AI today. I'm really to have you join us. Welcome to AI webcast. My name is Ashish Kutiala. I'm CMO at Traceable AI, and I'm bringing this feed to you from Austin, Texas. I know a lot of you are joining us from around the globe and at different time zones. Hopefully, you're as pumped as I am today to be on this call to hear the exciting news that we've been telling you about, that we're going to unveil today. Now, a little bit about the logistics about participating in this webcast. We are streaming this broadcast across Traceable.ai website, YouTube, LinkedIn, Twitter, and Facebook. And we want you to participate and we welcome your comments and questions. Simply in the comments, whichever platform you're using, and pick them up and get them to our and when they portion of the agenda, we will answer them. If you would like to share this feed with your colleagues, friends, or others, please feel free to send them in the chat box that you can. So, what are we going to talk about today? We're going to talk about not just the challenges of addressing API security that all of us have been hearing about, and I'll bring in a lot of special guests who are experts to talk about it. We're also making a very exciting announcement that you'll definitely want to hear about. So, who's joining us today? In today's broadcast, we'll be bringing in a very rich, diverse set of speakers whose knowledge you want to listen to, and we want to share that with them, right? We want to learn from them. First, I'll be bringing in Jyoti Bansal, co-founder of Traceable AI. We'll also bring in Sanjay Nagaraj, who is the co-founder and CTO of Traceable AI. Next, we're going to bring in Alyssa Knight. She's a recovering hacker and a CISO, so she has, very interesting background that you will definitely not want to miss, her speak on this subject. We're going to bring in Upendra Amartikar, the CISO, our Chief Security Officer at Snap Finance. Ron Teeter, who's the Vice President of Engineering at JobVite. Greg Phillips, who is CTO at Hauser. Ralph Pine, who is VP of Security at Nextroll and an investor with Silicon Valley CISO Investments. And Alan Schimmel, who has co-founded two security startups. He runs DevOps.com and SecurityBoulevard.com. What a rich set of thought leaders, executives, builders, and you're going to learn so much about API security and what's going on in this field. Finally, you want to participate with us and interact with us on our social media channels. As part of this launch this week, we're giving away $100 daily price, every day of the week till the end of the week. Follow us on LinkedIn, YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, and we have the details of what are the things you have to do to be eligible to win these prizes. And so let's start with today's broadcast. Let's introduce my guest. His name is Jyoti Bansal. He's the co-founder and CEO of Traceable AI. Jyoti is a very passionate solver of complex software engineering problems and has successfully founded many companies to solve these problems. He was the founder and CEO of AppDynamics, which was acquired by Cisco for about $3.7 billion. He went on to found Harness.io, solving for CI/CD problems in the engineering world, and then subsequently Traceable AI. In addition to founding these companies, Jyoti is also the founder of Unusual Ventures, a venture capital firm, and Big Labs Studio. Welcome me in joining Jyoti Bansal. Jyoti, a very good morning to you. Thanks for helping me kick off this event.
Thank you, Ashish.
Jyoti, I shared your background with the audience, and you've started many companies with innovative and new approaches to solve, pretty complex engineering problems. I'd love for you to share, why did you found Traceable AI? Specifically, the mission of the company says we want to protect every line of code in the world. It's a very interesting vision statement, very ambitious. So can you kind of explain to the audience and share with your thoughts on Traceable AI?
Absolutely. That's the mission we started Traceable AI with, that how can we protect every line of code in the world? And yes, it's ambitious, but we have to think big and we have to think ambitious because this is a big problem. If I fast forward, 10 years from now, the whole world will be running on software. There is no doubt about that. And everything we do in our lives will be through interconnected software systems everywhere. So we have to make sure that all of these software systems code behind is secure, so that we all feel comfortable about all of this, right? This has to be done through a few fundamental things. which sound hard in concept, but actually really simple to do if we can achieve them technically, right? Number one is, can we watch every line of code out there when it runs in production? So if an engineer writes 1,000 lines of code and it's out there and running, can we find where the code is, what the code is doing, and how it's running, right? The second part is, can we learn the normal behavior of how the code was supposed to run? What was the developer intent when they wrote that? And now the third part is, if you see anything abnormal, anything abnormal meaning it doesn't meet the developer intent, then can you flag it, or can you block it, or can you do something about it? Right? So every single line of code in the world should have that safety net built around it, which is around those three things. Someone should be watching all of that code running in production. Then second is, you have to be learning the normal intent for that code. And third, you have to protect. One is using the code against the normal developer intent. So it could be an attacker, a hacker, or a malicious person doing that, and you have to be able to stop that. Right? And there's trillions of code out there, and that will continue to increase. We do have to take this approach, or we can never solve this problem. So to me, it's a no-brainer that we need to solve this problem, and to solve, and but we have to make it visible and possible. And traceable AI that can make this possible.
Thank you, Jyoti. That makes a lot of sense, and it is really ambitious. But you have to solve this problem, and you traceable about a year ago from, and it's early in the company. Can you share with us a little bit the company's journey and the market reactions to the problem you're trying to solve? Has there been good reception to this problem? Like, have you learned anything very interesting thus far?
Yes, definitely. The first thing is the new API economy. They had fueled the speed of innovation. APIs helps team it faster, empowers you develop fast using CI/CD, microservices, serverless. That's very, very, and you want developers to smaller and smaller, connect those smaller pieces through internal APIs, external APIs, or through third-party APIs. And that picture of how innovation is going on, right? And now you want to secure these APIs, but not by slowing down the developers. That's the whole point of APIs, that unleash this innovation velocity, right? So you want to secure them, but you want to make sure that the velocity for developers is not impacted through it, right? But the APIs are opening up all of these attack surfaces that didn't exist before. And you really need to rethink how you're going to protect your applications against all of these new attack surfaces. What we have seen in the last year is, there's definitely a lot of education and learning that's happening in different teams, dev, ops, security teams, trying to figure this out. With the pace of change around APIs, a risk around APIs. A lot of organizations don't even know which APIs exist, internal, external, what risks does it bring to their organizations. So we are definitely, in the last year, we have seen a lot of awareness and earlier adoption of focused security processes starting to happen. As a company, it's been a great year for us. We have seen validation in the market from a lot of early adopter customers from us. We have been able to deliver a comprehensive API security solution to a lot of these customers. Through this year, we also announced investment, from SVC, the group of Silicon Valley CISOs that are helping us build our platform. So definitely, it's been a pretty exciting year with a lot of validation of our mission of securing every line of code in the world, with a strong focus on the APIs that are the gates and windows to that all the code.
Thanks, Jyoti. Like it definitely, the investment and the validation by customers goes a long way in kind of helping, you realize that you're solving a real world problem that has a demand out there. So, but it still seems like how you describe that, with all these moving parts and not, it's a really complex and hard problem to solve with, the current tools that exist. You need something very sophisticated and complex to instrument a solution, protect against these attacks. How are you working to solve? Can you explain in a few words how Traceable AI works to protect against these kind of distributed attacks and distributed components?
Yeah, Traceable AI is designed as an end-to-end comprehensive platform for application security. If you compare to the legacy approaches to application security, your WAF, RASP kind of solutions that security teams have used traditionally, we take a very, very different approach. Because when it comes to APIs, WAFs really don't have any kind of solution to secure them. If you look at a WAF, it was designed to protect systems against attacks on your legacy web. And these attacks are small things like actions. And normally a WAF will just look at whether you have a form field on your website where someone can type in a SQL query, use it to steal some data. And all of that is fine, but that's not how attackers are stealing data from APIs. They're using very different kind of attacks. Most WAFs work, to protect against these legacy things, but they have a lot of challenges on how to scale, and how to protect against these kind of modern attacks that are happening. So our fundamental approach is very different. It's about building a layer of tracing and instrumentation. And we make these tracing and instrumentation capabilities extremely easy to use thanks to very lightweight agents that we provide. So we have agents that run in different programming environments like Java, .NET, PHP, Node.js, Python. And these agents you can also put in your application proxies or your Kubernetes clusters as sidecars. In just a few minutes, you these lightweight agents. And that's really will start discover happening in your application. All your APIs, based on real-time traffic, right? So and now we will start doing an assessment of like which APIs are risky, which APIs are internal, which APIs are external, where is sensitive data in through these APIs, how the data flows between different microservices, and all of this assessment is happening in real time between in a matter of minutes, right? So now we can help you understand questions are, what are the third party APIs you're invoking, what are the third party systems you're invoking, which APIs that you have where you are consuming sensitive data from the consumers, and we'll draw all of this into like a Google Maps kind of traffic picture in just a minute. So you see everything that's happening in your system, right? So once we understand all of that, now the second part in our system is to create a behavioral learning model around the actual use of your APIs and the application code, to understand questions like, which users are accessing which APIs, which users are passing what data to it, what is a normal sequence of API calls or click in the web application that the users will do, what internal microservices are invoked by every API, what pieces of data are going from one API to another, what's the volume of data being transferred. All of these things, we understand in this behavioral learning model that we are building. That's it's a very powerful learning model. Once that model is built, this gives us this n-dimensional behavior around everything that's happening in your application and APIs. And there's so much API traffic that once you put us in production and we see the traffic, it doesn't take us long to build out a very accurate model around that, right? So now once we have built that model, every single call that is happening after that, every single API, every single user interaction, we can compare it against that normal behavior model that we built, right? So for example, like normal call some API, they're asking for data for user, but we see a call to an API and is asking data for 100,000 users. We can flag that because we know that there's something really anomalous about it. People should not be asking for data for 100,000 users. So it might be malicious, and we can stop that kind of data theft in that case, right? And now what after that, what we start doing is we develop a scoring mechanism where we can figure out what kind of attack someone might be trying to do, right? So are they trying to steal data? Are they trying to create a remediation mechanism, like blocking a specific user or blocking a particular way of invoking API? And we can alert your engineering team to fix the bug in the API, that's allowing that in the first place. So this is a very different approach to the traditional app security approaches, which app security approaches traditionally in a WAF and RASP all were very rule based. That you define, and the WAF or RASP will match the traffic patterns coming in against that rule, and based mostly based on regular expressions. We don't do any of that. For us, it's really about understanding this n-dimensional behavior of your APIs and applications. It's building the behavioral model and then comparing every API call, and every a sequence user activity against the behavioral model, and then figure out where the abnormal bad things are and stop them.
That, Jyoti, it just seems to me that you've taken a, pretty hard to crack problem and come up with an approach that actually helps users and practitioner solve the problem in a way that actually works for them, right? It's amazing. But it seems like this will take prolonged education and awareness and an approach, to solve for this in a different way than, the traditional security ways to solve this. So like, just putting in a WAF and adding more rules, for example, is just not going to get ahead of this problem. So in that spirit, like, my big question of the day today is, what is traceable AI and what are you on today that's going to help solving this problem that you just described?
Thank you, Ashish. Today, we are very excited to announce industry's first free API security solution. So why are we doing this? Why are we making free and available as a free tier? Before, is becoming such a fundamental need for the modern software engineering. We are going into this massive adoption of cloud native apps, which is creating these attack surfaces. The adoption of DevOps, adoption of CI/CD, adoption of microservices, adoption of serverless. So it's all creating this API security crisis. And what we see in the market is there's a lack of API security awareness. A lot of people don't realize that they have to be ahead of this. And our intention of creating a free tier is that we can democratize it. We can make it for different teams to get started with security. They can start, APIs do they have, security risk them, which APIs the vulnerability them, and remove barriers from that, from a education perspective, from a budget allocation perspective, so that they can get started and see what the challenges around their APIs are, and and they can adopt a broader API security, application security platform, when they're ready for it. We also think, like, it's not just access to our free tier that we are providing, and it's the first time in this market, something like that. It's also to make it extremely simple and easy. So as part of this release, that's a big part of our focus. That in less than 10 minutes, you put our agents, inside in your applications, on your or your proxies, and we will make you API security champions. That you can get all the visibility inside your APIs. Which APIs are there, internal, external. Which APIs have what kind of risk associated with them. Which APIs are sensitive data into how the data, and all of that you get in less and for, so that you can get started towards the journey for API security. So we can't wait to hear all this from teams that will get started our here, and what they have discovered, what APIs got blocked, how made them more and more efficient. This massive movement around API security awareness by doing this.
Jyoti, that is really exciting. I hope, like, everybody takes a look at the solution and the very least discovers what APIs they're using in their environment. I think that's a huge leap forward. Thank you very much for sharing that with us. And now let's head over to Sanjay Nagaraj, CTO and co-founder of Traceable, for some more details. An entrepreneur and a Silicon engineering leader, passionate about building products that take on significant problem areas, and believes in building products and teams that are obsessed with customer successes. Prior to being, a co-founder at Traceable and CTO here, he was VP of engineering for AppDynamics and Cisco. The innovation he built with his team was really critical in DevOps team, lead digital transformation in many Fortune 100 companies. Please welcome me in joining Sanjay Nagaraj. Sanjay, welcome to the webcast.
Thank you, Ashish. It's a pleasure to be on this webcast, and obviously, it's a very exciting time at Traceable today as we launch the industry's first free API security solution. So let's look into it. So what's included as part of this? So as part of the free tier, uh, here are the things that are included. As Jyoti was talking about, mainly it is about API security for developers and DevOps and DevSecOps that way. How can they get started on a free edition of a product to show the value of API security in their organizations? So as part of the free tier, what we are offering is basic trace observability, which has all the information about the traces and the metadata that's coming together as part of the traces itself. API discovery and risk assessment, that's part of the product. API intelligence broadly, which provides insights on top of the API itself. Basic security protection and ML-based security tuning as part of this. And we are limiting this to 40 API endpoints. So the beauty there is that they can get to experience the product as part of the free edition and as part of the team trial edition that they're going to get, if API security is important for them and is critical to their organizations. That way, they get to go seek a budget for it and then upgrade to license and upgrade the license to a team or an enterprise edition. So now, the beauty that we want to do is all of these things. We want to offer that in self-service and the deployments, which happens under 10 minutes. That's one of the things that we are very happy with. And I'll walk you through basics of that as a demo, where you can deploy it in under 10 minutes and how we do it and what we support and everything else. But let's talk a little bit about the product tiers itself first. From a free tier perspective, we talked about what's included as part of the free tier. Free tier is for everyone. Everyone who wants to get into API security, understand API security, and start to evangelize API security as part of their organizations. So free tier is something that I recommend people coming in and starting to use it. From a team edition perspective, this is for the product and DevOps teams that way, as part of lines of businesses, or it could be small businesses who are looking to discover the assets as in APIs and just understand the risk associated with these APIs and provide protection for those API-driven applications. Enterprise edition, which is a fully featured enterprise-grade API security, of course, comes with all of the functionality that exists in terms of team edition, but it is for larger teams and for broader DevSecOps teams that way. And this is the most complete application and context-driven solution that Traceable is offering. Now, from a pricing perspective, free edition, of course, $0 per API per endpoint. So the pricing is all based on API endpoints. And from a team edition perspective, this is $10 and enterprise edition is $20. Of course, the key difference between team edition and enterprise edition is the aspect around the limit on the endpoints. Enterprise edition, of course, there is unlimited endpoints available as part of it that you can buy. And then there is the advanced cloud processing that's available on top of the data itself, which enables all of the advanced analytics aspects of it from a security perspective. That's from a pricing and the tiers perspective. Now let's dig in to let's get into the demo. But before we get into the demo, I wanted to at least give an idea of, from a Traceable perspective, a bit of a recap as to why Traceable is choosing a different way when it comes to application security itself. The platform itself is based on distributed tracing, which helps you connect the dots across your applications and your different microservices and APIs. And on top of this is where the ML platform has been built on top of this to enable visibility, protection, and analytics into your applications. Now, when it comes to the next gen of application security and API security, what our key focus on there is, how do you observe all of the data that flows through your applications to tie the activities from the user to the APIs that they are interacting with, and the data that's flowing through those APIs to the code that's actually getting executed. All of these four components come together through the behavioral engine to form the application context, which includes the API behavior, the code behavior, the user behavior, the risk posture itself from an API perspective, and the data behavior, and also taking into consideration the user trust itself. All of these things as an application context is what enables the platform to solve all of your API security challenges that way, to enable many of the security use cases, not just in terms of the discovery or the risk assessment aspect of it, but of course, various protections against your typical attacks, but also the business logic attacks. So now, having that context, let's jump into the demo, which I will walk through from a sign-up perspective, going through what the basic deployment experience is going to be. Then I'll talk about the API intelligence and the protection aspects of it, and then talk about basically from an analytics perspective at a high level. So let's jump into the demo now. So a simple sign-up screen, just sign up, put in your business email, and you're pretty much into the product. So after sign up, you land on this page, which will let you bring your own application into Traceable AI. And of course, we have an option to explore Playground, where we have a sample application, which is an e-commerce application, where we are protecting that e-commerce application and discovering all of the APIs and enabling advanced analytics as part of that. You will be able to take a look at it. But if you bring your own application, when you click on Install Now, this is going to take you through a simple set of steps now to let you deploy the application, where first you deploy the platform agents, and then you deploy the tracing agents, then you generate the traffic, and that's it. Now, then you'll be in your AI platform to kind of take a look at everything that we can do from your APIs and protection of those APIs. So when you click next, there are various options here in Kubernetes deployment or as a virtual machine as a deployment. And once you deploy the platform agent itself, which is an intelligence service that collects the data locally and does many of the local decision making as well, then you're going to deploy the tracing agents. In my sample, obviously, I have a Java agent and an Nginx deployed. You could have a sidecar as a proxy. We are working on many other things, and you'll start to see that come through over the next days and weeks that way in terms of API gateway support and various different languages and web servers and everything else. But from an instructions perspective, it is pretty straightforward. Either you could do a Kubernetes-based deployment or a standalone deployment. The same thing when it comes to Nginx as well. There are various options that you can deploy. Very, very straightforward. Because as I said, the goal is to keep the deployment under 5 minutes in many cases and under 10 minutes in other cases, right? So this is, again, once you're deployed, you're pretty much into the screen, which basically tells you how many services have been discovered, how many deployments have occurred and everything else. And that's about it. Then you can just go into Traceable.
So the first thing you see when you land in Traceable is the API intelligence dashboard. This is where you get to see all of the API endpoints that we are discovering and the services and domains that we discover. So API endpoints, you also understand the external endpoints and the internal endpoints that we have discovered. And you're able to look at those endpoints from a call volume perspective as well. The endpoints are categorized as learned endpoints that we have learned and certain endpoints that are still under learning as part of the process. So as part of this endpoint, we are basing all of the learning, as we were discussing about, based on the traffic itself. And here is all of the traces that are getting captured as part of this. So you get to understand that we have all of the data associated with the requests and responses that are coming through as part of the traffic. So the flow that way includes all of the data that is going through, and you have an understanding of the APIs and everything else that is flowing through. There are, of course, some key metrics associated with each of these services, and you can always drill in to details by looking just at the flow independently itself. And then, as you can see, there are insights that we capture based on the learning that we do, which includes external APIs, internal APIs, and the types of requests that are flowing through, the headers that are coming through, and everything else. And this is what helps us actually now build towards protection.
Now let's see how we actually do this. So if you look at here, all of the endpoints that are getting discovered as part of the as part of your traffic provides for the details that are needed in order to build the API DNA itself to enable us to not just build from a discovery and learning perspective, but protection angle of it, right? That way we understand which are the APIs and what are all the different activities that are happening in terms of traces associated with each of these APIs. And there are certain key insights around what are the different types of statuses that these APIs have, what are the roles that the people are using as part of their APIs, and are they authenticated APIs? Are they unauthenticated APIs? Do they have sensitive data as part of it? Is it an external API or an internal API? And then, of course, all the risk details that we were talking about. Now, let me drill into one of these endpoints to understand the DNA of that endpoint. Here I have an endpoint which is called as checkout, because as I said, our demo application is an e-commerce application, the typical ones that you guys would have seen, which it has a multitude of services, as you can see, written in various different languages and deployed in Kubernetes and everything else fronted by an Nginx as a service. When you land into the API details, you land into the DNA aspect of it. This is where you get to understand the risk factors itself associated with the risk, but also understand the other details that are associated with the API endpoint, including that it is an authenticated endpoint and what are the different roles that are actually accessing. You can tag these endpoints with your own custom tags that way, because some endpoints need to be tracked specific to the business. And of course, you can rate limit the particular endpoints, and there are various other features that actually we can get into in terms of endpoint specific or service specific that way as you go through the settings on some of these things. Also, you get to know all of the different parameters that are flowing through as part of this API, and you understand not only from a request perspective, but from a response perspective. And of course, you can search through different things and different aspects of it, which ones contain PII, which one is required. Is there any new parameters that have actually been seen, or parameters that we have seen an updated type of activity, or is there some parameters that we feel we are still learning associated with that endpoint itself? So you get to obviously filter around all of those things, but also you get to understand some of the aspects around sensitive data itself. You understand that this is a street address type of it, or this is a credit card type of a parameter as part of your endpoint. So you get an overall understanding of the endpoint, and also the understanding of the parameters itself. So from an overview perspective for the endpoint, you're looking at the DNA. So in a lot of our cases, our customers use the product to enable them to understand their APIs a lot better. So we have one customer who, for example, spent $1 million last year for GDPR compliance that way, but they are now using the product to understand their APIs and the data that is flowing through those APIs, and how it actually impacts their sensitive data that is flowing through. So as part of that, they're also able to go and tag certain APIs differently based on the business needs, so that they understand which APIs to focus on, right? So some of our customers are using the APIs to kind of from a rate limiting perspective. So there is the understanding from our perspective as to how the usage of the endpoints is being, how the endpoints are being used. So that will kind of enable the customers to rate limit the endpoints itself in a different way, based on data, based on user activity and everything else. So that's again, customers are using at the endpoint level, or in some cases the service levels, to track the data and to use the insights provided as part of the APIs itself, to basically better manage their APIs. That's the main thing from a endpoint perspective. From a protection perspective, if you look through the attackers, the key difference from a product perspective is how we look at users who are actually triggering the attacks and the malicious users that way as part of the system, because we are able to attribute the activities to the users of the APIs itself. We are able to then provide a detailed understanding of the overall kill chain, for example, a user has been displaying as part of the attack vectors itself. So if you look at, for example, this user, there's a clear path to all of the different things the user has been doing. That means that chronologically, you can understand all of the different attacks that the user has been creating as part of using the APIs itself, but also you're able to kind of understand the overall pattern and the approach in terms of the reconnaissance as well as an attack to kind of for them to even understand the APIs. And that's where you see some of the type anomalies and everything else getting triggered as part of it. Now, if you dig further detail, let's take, for example, an authorization bypass as an attack for one of the users. And if you look at this user, for example, there is a bunch of different attacks that the user has triggered, but one thing I want to show you guys is from an authorization bypass perspective at an object level, because we do understand the data flow and we understand the user API flow itself, we are able to kind of understand what are the types of data this user is able to access and the user should not be able to access. Based on that, we can actually detect and say that, hey, there is an authorization bypass that is happening. The beauty is because we're able to actually look at all the data and the data can be presented to you. And of course, a lot of this data from a privacy perspective can be obfuscated. Many of our customers are using this to protect them against the business logic vulnerabilities that way. And the beauty is because we are capturing the entire user session, we do understand all of the activity and where the threat was actually triggered that way, right, as part of the overall activity for the user itself. Now, because of the way that we have the attackers, actually, it's being grouped by attackers. That means that you can actually go block this particular attacker itself. And when you go and block the attacker that way, you can either block them temporarily, or you can put them in a permanent deny list that way, and of course suspend them temporarily and everything else. So there's various options available from a user perspective. There is, of course, all the options that are available in terms of your typical rate limiting as in rules, or if you bring in your own rules based on the data and everything else, which is available as part of all of the administration capabilities as part of the product itself. Now, one thing I wanted to kind of show you as part of the various events as well, you have an event way of looking at it by understanding all the high aspects of it, or looking at it from an actor perspective, or for a particular endpoint that way, or for a service. You're able to understand all of the different types of attacks, legacy attacks, as well as anything as in business logic type of attacks that way. Like, this gives you an entire idea of how the attack patterns have been and what types of attacks are coming in, so that you know what to focus on that way. But the key area of focus should be on looking at the actors and looking at the services or the endpoints that are actually being attacked, and also the most risky ones that way. That's where the key difference comes in terms of how we take the overall application context in terms of the traces that we build as well to enable this type of attack detection. So looking at this attack again, the beauty, as we were talking about the users and everything else, is captured as an entire session, right? As you can understand. Now let's drill down into the session itself, which is where the beauty of distributed tracing as a platform and all of the things from an advanced analytics perspective comes through. As you can see, this is all the activities the particular user in a single session has been performing. And we have information about all of that data that way. Now, if you just drill in to the activity itself, you are not only able to see all of the information associated with the user, all the different activities, and all the different request and response activity associated with the particular API call itself, but you're also able to now look at the entire trace as well. In terms of, this is with the power of distributed tracing for us, because we are now able to capture all of the information all the way from Nginx into your front-end services, into login, and how actually the whole activity for the particular user happens when the user calls get order and order ID. So our customers, the way they're using this is by creating that bridge between dev, security, and operations teams by enabling this activity to be monitored and understood from a pre-prod perspective, where new APIs are coming all the time, so that they understand the flow and they understand what the risk associated with those APIs, so that they can better basically have visibility into those APIs, new APIs that come in, but also from a production perspective, because then the developers and the security and operations teams can speak the same language and understand the flow and look at the data as it's flowing through those APIs itself. So that's a brief preview of the product and everything else. So look forward to you guys trying it out in self-service and letting us know how we did.
Thank you, Sanjay. Wow, that was very awesome. Like a lot of product-rich functionality, and different modes at which tiers that people can sign up on and try it for free. I'm really excited, and thank you so much for doing the demo and walking us through that. All right, now to our next speaker. I want to bring in a very special friend of mine. I've known her for a while, and she's a cybersecurity expert. I'd love to bring Alyssa Knight to the show. Welcome, Alyssa, to the show.
Hi, Ashish. Thanks for having me here.
It's my absolute pleasure to host you today. Let me tell the audience a little bit about you, and I would love for you to introduce yourself. But you are a cybersecurity expert, and not just an accomplished one who knows cybersecurity really well, but apparently one who has lived both sides of the law. You've been a hacker before, and you've been in trouble with the police and law enforcement, but now you actually have worked for law enforcement. Very interesting background. Can you tell our audience a little bit more about yourself?
Sure. It's a typical Hollywood script, right? So I started hacking when I was 13 and ended up hacking to a government network when I was 17. And the agents were waiting for me at school when I got there and arrested me right as I stepped foot on campus. And I was fortunate in the fact that the charges were dropped because of a technicality. They interrogated me without my parents there, or without a lawyer. I guess they just forgot the fact that I was a minor, and ended up going to work for the U.S. intelligence community shortly thereafter. So I was really lucky in the fact that I could be wearing orange today. Orange does not look good on me. So yeah, my life took a very interesting turn at that point, and realized that I could actually make money doing what I love without having to worry about getting arrested for it. So things have definitely changed over the last 2 decades.
That's, I hear this story from you. I've heard it maybe 3 or 4 times now. I'm always impressed, right? You said something here that's very relevant to the webcast today, right? You've done a lot of research around APIs and API security, and it's so scary when you hear right now that the adoption of APIs, which is supposed to help software development and innovation, is creating all these security challenges. But is it really true? I mean, how do you know? I mean, I know you've dabbled in security for a long time now. What specific things have you done around API, security and research that you can share with our audience?
It's funny. I just kind of accidentally fall into it. It's never planned. My favorite quote in life is, "Life happens while you're planning other things," and that couldn't be truer for my life story. So before all of this, I was living in Stuttgart, Germany, hacking connected cars for different tier 1 OEMs and automakers. And then I was approached by a company that made an API security solution. They wanted me to create content for them. And, as with my typical content, what I've affectionately coined adversarial content, meaning that I create content for cybersecurity vendors, and instead of just doing these boring white papers where you just list off the features of their product, I like to show the efficacy of their product by hacking something. So this API security company came along and said, "Look, we'd really like you to create some videos and some papers for us." And my response was, "Well, if you guys secure APIs, why don't I hack an API and show how your product would have prevented it?" And so that's exactly what I do. And that's how I fell into API hacking. That's how I fell into API security. A lot of people have this misperception that hackers just know everything. We know how to hack everything. We know how to hack cars. We just come out of the womb knowing this stuff. When I walked into it, I really didn't even know how to spell API. And so over the last decade, that's really been the focus of my vulnerability research, is hacking APIs. And I had to learn everything about it that I could in order to hack them. And to me, that's all hacking really is, right, Ashish? It's learning how something works, and then just sending stimulus to it that the developer didn't expect to receive.
Um,
Right.
you hacked some law enforcement cars, like, and you hacked some banks, and you hacked like some other institutions which were based on like their APIs, and you did a lot of research on that. But I would imagine that all of these organizations had some sort of existing solutions that they had in place to kind of prevent hacks like that. Why didn't that work? Like, what is it that about today's solutions that's not working?
So I would say that the best answer to your question is, I think it's you've been working in, when you get to the point when you've been working in security for so long, you remember legacy antivirus like Symantec, or legacy web application firewalls to protect your web servers, and your automatic inclination is to go back to what you remember and what you understand. And you know that if something spoke the HTTP protocol, it must be secured with a WAF, because it must be treated like a web server. If it walks like a duck and quacks like a duck, it must be a duck, right? So if an API speaks HTTP, then clearly you have to use a WAF to secure it, or an API gateway. So my GPS over the course of the last decade with hacking APIs was, in 2019, I downloaded 30 financial services and fintech mobile apps. I reverse engineered them and hacked the backend APIs in less than a week of 30 apps. In 2020, I downloaded 30 mobile health and telehealth apps and hacked those, and that was in less than a week. Now this year, I'm focused on hacking fire APIs, and somewhere in that mix, I was also hacking law enforcement vehicles and taking remote control of the vehicle over the APIs. The fact of the matter is that everything today talks to APIs, whether it's our financial infrastructure, it's our plumbing for our financial system, it's plumbing for our health system, it's the plumbing for IoT. And so, with data being worth more than oil, hackers are quickly turning their attention to hacking APIs. So we definitely need to catch up, and we need to get better, because what I've seen over the last decade, it only seems to be getting worse. And much to your point about the security controls to properly secure APIs, I think it's, like I said, it's can't teach an old dog new tricks kind of thing. You just grew up just knowing that you secure web services with a WAF. And what a lot of people don't know is that a lot of these APIs that I hacked in my research were all behind WAFs. They were all secured behind WAFs. And I was able to execute things like broken object level authorization, or IDOR, and secure direct object reference. Mass assignment. A lot of these things are things that WAFs or rules-based security controls don't understand and don't know to look for. A WAF is looking for something malicious in the payload, like a SQL injection. They're not going to look for things like whether or not I, as a listenite who is properly authenticated and have a ticket, have a token, that I shouldn't be authorized to request Ashish's patient records. It doesn't.
It doesn't have that necessary context.
Yeah, it doesn't have that context in security. There's no context there. It just knows that, okay, Alyssa's properly authenticated. She has a token, and I don't see anything really bad in her payload that she's trying to execute. So what she's asking for must be legitimate. And unfortunately, that's what's causing a lot of the problems. And and look, you and I have been friends for a while. You know me very well. I'm very opinionated. And one thing that I can say, is the analyst community is not helping, right? So you have these analysts that are basically putting out material. There was a report that was recently put out about how web application firewalls can be used to secure APIs. I think it's awful. I think it's wrong. I think that is the impetus behind a lot of the problems that we're facing today. Is CISOs and buyers listen to that, and they treat that as the biblical word. And unfortunately, what they need to be doing is listening to hackers like myself who are focused on hacking APIs and saying, look, no, this is the wrong tool for the job. If you're a hammer, everything looks like a nail. And that's simply just not the case.
No, absolutely. I think, we had Jyoti and then Sanjay, and then you now talking about the importance of taking a look at this whole approach of protecting APIs from a completely different approach, right? You can't put a wall in front and expect that to have signature-based protection. Like, you need to understand the concept. So
Right.
in the light of that, you heard Jyoti earlier in the show announce our, industry's first free API solution that everybody can use. Why do you think that announcement is important? Are you excited about it? Do you think it's going to make any difference, like out there, like for organizations who might want to take a look at this?
Of course, I'm excited about it. It's kind of like, would you go into war without a gun? You just go there with bullets. Like you go there with a gun and the bullets. And you need your tools, right? Every operator needs her tools, and just like a surgeon wouldn't go into surgery without her scalpel. To me, the more tools, the better. And there's a reason why we say tactics, techniques, and procedures. Or you'll hear people say tactics and tools, or tactics, techniques, and tools, because the tools are so important. Knowing how to use them, being able to have access to them, and the fact that the fact that Traceable is democratized that is huge, and it's something that we need more of. If you think about it, adversaries have unlimited amounts of time and resources and tools available to them. We need the same tools to defend against them.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Alyssa, for sharing your thoughts. I certainly learned even something more by talking to you today, like than I have in the
Thanks.
past. Every time I talk to you, there's something new for me to learn. Don't forget to keep writing in your questions or comments in the chat windows, and we'll respond to them in the Q&A session that's coming up. And next, I would like to bring in Upendra Mardikar from Snap Finance. Upendra, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much.
Hi, Upendra. Can you tell us a little bit about what you do in your company, your name, title, responsibility in the company, please?
Absolutely. Thank you so much. My name is Upendra Mardikar. I'm the Chief Security Officer of Snap Finance. Snap Finance is in the LTO, which is the lease to own, BNPL, and Snap loans. And happy to be here.
So, Upendra, as a Chief Security Officer at Snap Finance, I would love to hear your views on how does the proliferation of API adoption by so many companies, including companies like Snap Finance, change the security challenges for a CISO or Chief Security Officer? Is protecting APIs really that different from protecting from other traditional security threats? You're protecting from outside threats and inside threats all the time. So how is it different?
Yeah, absolutely, Ashish. If we think about it, everything is an API or soon will be. And so what I'm saying is that it will not be right to say that the traditional Web 1.0 HTML pages were not APIs. They were APIs. Post is an API, for example. And then it evolved to REST and gRPC and other kind of APIs. Everything is an API. Whether you are talking about the native applications, the mobile native applications, for example, and whether it's a developer platform that you are exposing. Now, there are, several companies, where we have been involved in exposing these APIs as a part of the developer platform. And there are lots of developer first companies that are evolving. So the point is that even in the traditional sense, everything has been APIs. Now, as we look at what is the trend happening in the industry, is that these APIs are going more and more towards devices. So there are multiple devices that are communicating directly with our backend servers. To give you an example, single page applications, the SPAs that we lovingly call, right? So when these SPAs are actually communicating with us, this is like a device on the other side, an IoT and other kind of devices, some mobile phones. All these are communicating with our backend servers, and that entire orchestration, it is moving out of the four-wall boundaries. And all these four wall boundaries that we had, that hey, there is only a north-south traffic, that paradigm is changing. So the orchestration actually is happening on the devices side with SPAs. So now, when we look at the new organization, as the APIs are becoming stateless, and this entire orchestration is happening outside, with that kind of transition, it's very difficult for you to know where the attacker is actually coming from. And so as CISOs, that becomes one of the big challenges, because we don't know whether it is, earlier it was like API 1, API 2, API 3, but now, you can directly communicate with the API 3, and, so there is no sequencing as such. So with the partners, when we are ingesting and for the ingress and egress traffic, that entire paradigm has shifted. So it is no longer just north-south. It is also an east-west traffic. And we need to think about how these tentacles, if you will, that come out of that, right? I mean, the Hydra architecture, that is the new paradigm. And so that is the shift that CISOs need to take care of when they are thinking about the APIs. And that shift is what differentiates between the traditional and the new paradigm.
Very interesting, very, very insightful, Upendra. Thank you very much for that explanation. I'm sure, a lot of our viewers kind of benefited from that, as they're trying to grapple with these new models that are coming up. Now, Upendra, this next question is also for you. I would like to ask you, as a chief security officer, why aren't today's solutions addressing these new API security challenges? Are there any drawbacks? Why this emphasis on let's take a fresh look at how to solve for these new security challenges regarding APIs?
Yeah, so today, there are lots of solutions that are trying to manage the life cycle of APIs. So what I mean by life cycle of APIs is the creation, the planning, the development of those APIs, the testing, and how do we deploy and potentially retire those APIs. What happens is that when you're looking at this life cycle, how do you bake security by design, by default, and by deployment across all this life cycle? Now, Ashish, the paradigm shift is that we are assuming that we are creating these APIs from scratch. But in an organization where you have geographically distributed organizations and they are doing digital transformation, all these APIs, you can categorize these APIs into two buckets. One is an existing APIs and another one is how are we creating new APIs. The challenge is getting an inventory of all these polyglot APIs, the heterogeneous environments that add to the complexity, and getting all the inventory of the existing APIs, securing them, and going into the life cycle of APIs. That solution, at least I have not seen. And that is something which is a current drawback, in today's market, as I see. Again, I always keep on saying that know thyself and you will be liberated, right? So the same API, same concept applies over here. So know your APIs, know thy APIs. And if you know your APIs, you will be able to protect those APIs. So the solution needs to be pervasive across all the different phases of API lifecycle, and doing the discovery in real time, and doing the gap analysis, feeding back and closing the loop. That particular gap is there in the industry today. And I'm glad that Traceable is helping us solve that problem.
Thank you. Thank you for that answer, Upendra. Upendra, why is today's announcement by Jyoti about offering the industry's first free API security solution exciting to you as a security leader? What impact does this make for you? I know that you not only manage your organization, you're actually a security evangelist out there, kind of talking about this a lot. So any thoughts on, today's announcement?
Yeah, I'm super excited with this particular announcement today. To give you a context, security is an industry problem. Nation state actors are acting, and almost all the companies are trying to protect themselves. And this is all across the world. So it is growing like a pandemic, and all these cyber attacks are growing like pandemic, and we need to make sure that we protect all the companies in this bargain. So that is one driver, Ashish. The second thing is companies want to be competitive, and there is this paradigm shift that we talked about where all the companies are going towards APIs. So this particular solution, the opportunity to try it for free, gives a couple of things to the industry, in my opinion. It will enable all those security professionals who want to protect their companies to be not in the news, who are on the fence. From the budget perspective, it may be just reluctance in the organization for whatever reason. And it will be also, the reluctance can also come from they have not seen the movie perspective. So this will give them an opportunity to try it and see it in action before they can believe in it. So that is why this particular opportunity is very altruistic to protect the industry. See how you can protect your APIs.
That makes a lot of sense, Upendra. I mean, we are hoping that this broad, widespread adoption of, looking at APIs as a key thing for protecting your applications and the organization, right? The perimeter approach security is outdated now. The castle and moat, kind of like model is no longer valid. So we're hoping that people do take this seriously. But thank you very much for answering this question.
Thank you so much.
And now joining us next is Greg Phillips from Hauser.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Hi, Greg. Really nice that you could join us. Let's start with a little introduction. Tell us a little bit about yourself, your role and your company.
Yeah, so I'm Greg Phillips. I'm the Chief Technology Officer at Hauser. We are a startup real estate brokerage. We're innovating real estate transactions in a lot of different ways, but the main thing that I work on is our proprietary technology, which is the digital service delivery of real estate transactions in the end-to-end fashion. So what we do is we represent people to buy and sell homes, inclusive of real estate brokerage, mortgage, and title insurance services, all in one platform. And that digital platform is the API that we're securing using Traceable.
Awesome, Greg. So, Greg, as the CTO of Hauser, I'm sure you have a lot of security challenges. Could you share with our audience some of the API security challenges you were looking to solve?
Yeah, so a huge part of our business is delivered through, what is a highly complex monolithic API that we use to power our platform where our users conduct real estate transactions. And because we're in a lot of states and a lot of different geographies, that is like a huge monolithic API where there's a lot of localization and personalization where people are doing different things depending on what geography they're in or where they are in the transaction. And because of that, it's really hard to predict the ways in which it'll be used. And, we wanted to get our arms around, how is our API being used and, where might the vulnerabilities be? So just kind of really was concerned that we didn't know exactly, how our API was being used. We didn't have a good picture of that. And that was, the main challenge, I think, that we were looking to address.
Awesome. I mean, I'm sure a lot of, CTOs, head of engineering teams are grappling with the same challenge. Thank you very much for that. Also, Greg, you're a Traceable AI customer. You've deployed Traceable AI, and you've been using it now, for a while. Do you mind sharing with our audience, what problems has Traceable AI actually helped solve for you? What value have you found by deploying Traceable AI?
Yeah, so, the core of it is that I think it's almost impossible to predict what people are going to throw at your API once you get to a certain level of complexity. Once you have a complex API out in the world, you don't know what people are going to throw at it. So that made me really concerned about the potential security risks. And, Traceable has really helped us bring observability and intelligence to that problem directly at the API level. So all of our business logic is, conducted through the API. So there's not much security vulnerability at our UI level or the application level. It's really at the API level where everything is happening. And that is where I felt like we had a lot of security risk. And, the value of Traceable is really focusing on that API layer. So we've been able to actually discover in the last year that we've been using Traceable, 3 pretty serious vulnerabilities that I'm not sure we would have caught otherwise. And, we do a lot of transactions. So we do, over 1,300 real estate transactions on our platform in the last year. We'll do more than that in the year to come. Across that, we've blocked hundreds of threats using Traceable's threat detection. And we're also really concerned with, private information leaking out, and just really gives me peace of mind. And on top of that, as a technology professional that has some security background, I'm able to use Traceable to monitor and secure our environment without having to hire a security specialist.
That's awesome. I mean, I cannot imagine, how much data is kind of like your IP at, in this company. Transactions are one thing, knowing the, business logic to kind of conduct these real estate transactions, anybody can do that. But the data is really the value, the IP of your company, and you really can't afford to kind of have any leakage or theft of that. Pretty cool to know that you're able to protect that. My next question for you, Greg, is, today you heard our announcement. We're announcing a free API security solution for organizations to get started and learn the value of, what does API security mean? How do you manage, the challenge behind it? Your thoughts, when we offer a free, offering like this, do you think, there'll be more adoption and awareness spread with this?
Yeah, definitely. I think, one of the best ways to get people to understand a product is to get them into it and get them trying it. And, by making it free, you really reduce the barrier for that. And, with the quick setup that you're rolling out as well, I think that the more barriers you can take down, the more people that are going to try it, and they're going to actually be able to see their own APIs and how they're behaving and what threats are out there. And once you see that, you kind of can't unsee it, and what's maybe going on out there, and starting to think more about security and more about how to secure APIs that are on the internet.
Thanks, Greg. That hopefully other people get inspired by how you see the vision of this and adopt it. It's our dream to see that API security becomes really important in every organization's goals. Thank you for that answer. And it's my pleasure to introduce our next guest, Ron Teeter from JobWhite.
Hello, Steve. Nice to be here.
Thank you very much for joining us. Ron, can you tell our audience a little bit about who you are and where you work?
I'm Ron Teeter. I'm Vice President of Engineering at JobWhite, and I oversee all of the engineering team at JobWhite globally. We have about 170 engineers distributed around development centers around the world.
Hey, thanks, Ron. Thanks for introducing yourself. It's our pleasure to have you here. Let's start with your environment. Can you share a few details about your application architectures? You have a number of microservices and APIs that you've talked about that you use for this complex engineering organization, and the software that you're running. The business is running on your software. How does this look like? Where does all this reside? What does the data flow look like? It'd be awesome to hear about that.
Sure. JobWhite is a amalgamation of a number of different product lines, all focused on talent acquisition use cases, helping people build teams by sourcing and qualifying and hiring great team members. We've brought together a number of companies that were based on different tech stacks over the years. And so we've got a little bit of everything. We have some, legacy monolithic designed applications running in C#, all the way through, a modern microservice or function as a service written in Python. So it's an incredibly complex environment spanning almost 15 years of code development in a variety of technologies. And so looking to get an understanding of this complexity, is incredibly important to us. And so we invest very heavily in observability solutions across the board.
Thanks, Ron. Seems like a very, very complicated environment where it's constantly changing and maybe even hard for you to keep track of, like, what are the different components, APIs, different microservices. So, Ron, I'd be very curious to know, I'm sure as my audience here would also, what security solutions were you using before you bought in Traceable AI? Could you talk a little bit about that? And what was the need to kind of look at alternative solutions? Were there any shortcomings in the solutions that you were looking at, or you just needed new capability? Just very curious to hear about that.
Thank you. That's a great question. I think the primary concern that we had was we had been trying a number of perimeter defense solutions over the years. Your typical web application firewalls, trying to deal with both perimeter defense as well as penetrating defenses. It's very easy to say, hey, this doesn't look like it's a valid use case, I'm not going to let it through. But it's a little bit more difficult when you say, well, this looks like a valid use case, but it looks like a malicious payload. Typically, that's not something a WAF can defend against. And that is the nature of the vectors that we're looking at, right? People are not, we don't need to worry about people scanning us for executables and potentially finding something misconfigured. Most of our infrastructure is deployed as code. It's ruthlessly standardized and scanned. We know what we're hosting. The problem is that there could be a vulnerability in a third-party dependency that is potentially exploitable. And we want to know about that attack while it's happening, not later after the exploit has been published. And so looking for things that are anomalous but seemingly appropriate it is something that's very difficult to do with the current generation of web application firewalls out there.
That's very interesting. So, given your own developers and engineers are, creating so many modules, and then you're using modules from partners, other vendors outside, you just never know whose logic might be exploited. You just never know, it seems like it's perfectly good traffic, perfectly good requests, logical requests, but it just might be a malicious request. That's really hard to defend against, if you don't understand the business logic. Thanks for sharing that. I'm sure that's very interesting insight to a lot of folks. Ron, do you mind sharing a few details about your deployment experience with Traceable AI? So you bought the solution, you're very excited about it. How much time or effort did it take to actually deploy the solution in your engineering team?
That's a great inquiry. Installing the agent was fairly straightforward on our Java stack. We just simply added it to our bill of materials and rolled it out through our automated change management system. I think the key there that we saw was that there was a lot of interesting learnings early on. We've been involved in the pilot from the very beginning. It's been an interesting ecosystem to troubleshoot just because there are so many agents that are predominantly out there in the market, and sometimes there are conflicts. Traceable has been fantastic about working with our team to mitigate some of the concerns and actually, upstream some of the changes that they found to open telemetry.
Interesting. You've been using Traceable for a while, and I'd love to hear, I'm sure our audience would also like to hear, what are some of the key benefits, if you could summarize, that you're realizing by using Traceable AI?
I think that's a great call out, Ashish. At the end of the day, we're looking for outcomes, right? And when you're talking about investing in something to monitor your endpoints, you're expecting a return on that investment. And what I like about Traceable is it's very easy to quantify this. I think about it in terms of time to investigate, time to remediate, and in dealing combined with noise reduction. There are solutions out there that will say everything's a problem. There are solutions out there that will say this is really important. And when you dig into it and you start looking into it, it's like there's a lot of false positives out there, and there's a lot of challenges with existing tools around managing scale. One of the things I like about Traceable's approach is using the AI to remove a lot of the FUD and to do some of the preliminary root cause analysis, so that you start to look at things based on prevalence and probability, rather than just, hey, there's a whole bunch of things I noticed. When we look at it, it's about how much time is it going to save my team investigating this issue and mitigating it, or declaring it to be a false positive. And at 10 to 15 minutes each, over hundreds of APIs, it's very easy to cost justify this.
Well, thank you, Ron. And next, I'm very excited to bring to our webcast Ralph Pine from Nextrol and SVCI. Ralph, please, welcome to our show. We're very excited to have you here today. Can we start with an introduction of, can you tell our audience a little bit about yourself?
Hi, yeah, I'm Ralph. I'm VP of Security at Nextrol, and I was one of the founders of the Silicon Valley CISO Investors Group. So at Nextrol, I run the security group. We're responsible for everything information security related. And Nextrol we're kind of a mid-sized tech company, about 700 people, 200 and so odd engineers, building technology solutions in the MarTech space.
Ralph, let me ask you, starting off, a very basic question. You mentioned the Silicon Valley Investor Group.
Mm-hmm.
Tell us a little bit more about that group and what does it do? I understand it invests in emerging technologies and companies, but what's the charter of the group? How does it select the companies it invests in?
Yeah, so we're 60 CISOs based mainly in the US, but also around the world. We use our reach to find new and interesting security companies and technologies that are coming up, usually seed stage and Series A. And we have a very rigorous due diligence process. So, we'll find the companies, we'll bring them in, and then we'll run diligence, like really understand, often running, proof of concepts and so on, to dig in and understand, the technology, the product market fit, and so on.
Awesome. But it seems like you're busy with a day job as well as like a night job. Like that's awesome.
Yeah, it definitely takes some time. We only run the process once every 3 months, so I do get a break. But yeah, it does chew up some time. But it's exciting. We get to meet a lot of founders. We get to meet see a lot of emerging technologies. It's the kind of thing that as a CISO you're doing anyway, which is being out there, engaging and trying to solve modern problems. And so it's very complementary to the work that I do, as my day job.
Awesome. That leads to my next question. You are an investor. SVCI has invested into Traceable AI. Could you share, why did you decide as a group to invest in the company in Traceable AI?
Yeah. So we saw the role of, or the issues around API security as being a specific and emerging problem, and one that was not well resolved at this point in time. A lot of focus on the app security side and solutions like traditional WAF and RASP type solutions have been focused on the web side of things. And so, one of the things that we decided to do was to investigate this area. And as we, looked at the market and honed in on Traceable, it was the strength of the team. It was the vision, Traceable has a very broad vision compared to a lot of the point solutions that we saw. And, that combined with the ability to execute of the team was extremely compelling.
That's really confidence boosting. That's one of the reasons I joined Traceable. I'm very happy that, you feel the same way. And a whole group of CISOs behind, this group feels the same way. Interestingly, you're a customer of Traceable AI as well, having implemented Traceable at Nextrol. Would you mind sharing with our audience today, like what's the use case you're trying to
Yeah.
use?
So
Traceable?
the use case at Nextdoor was different, and so one of my big challenges is around data observability. So really understanding what data we have, the data flows, and so on. As a requirement from the privacy standards such as GDPR and CCPA. And one of the things that attracted to me to using Traceable was actually the flexibility of the solution. So we're using it, we will use it for all the app security goodness as well. But actually the primary use case that we have there is being able to look for confidential data or proprietary data types in motion, moving within our environment and also at the perimeter.
That's really interesting use case to hear. Of course, we know about it. We know that a lot of customers are looking towards it. Data privacy, guarding like data from being hacked, is probably the #1 use case today for a lot of companies. Data is IP, data is revenue, data, leakage of data is so common these days. So I'm pretty happy to hear that you're using that.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, it's the asset that we're looking to control. So all of the other security stuff we do around that is in service of protecting that asset. So having greater visibility over that is incredibly important.
Makes sense. So my last question to you is, why are you so excited about the announcement made by Traceable AI today about the free offering to all security professionals across the organization? No matter the size of your organization, you can start to use this free offering. Why is this exciting to you as an investor or as a customer?
I can see, from a personal challenge, there's always an issue with, onboarding a new vendor, going through, finance processes, all this kind of stuff. And, by having this free tier, you're eliminating that barrier to get at least a certain level of control and observability for your applications. And I think this is just going to put this in front of a lot more companies, and that's, as a practitioner and someone who cares about security in the industry, I think it's important to have those kind of controls and have that entry point. As an investor, ultimately, it means that, more people will be using the product, and ultimately, as a result of that, that should convert into more sales, ultimately, leads to greater valuation.
Thank you so much, Ralph. That was really good to hear. Thank you for sharing your views.
Great. Thank you.
And now it's my pleasure to invite Alan Schimmel, the CEO of Media Ops, to the webcast. Alan, welcome to the show.
Ashish, thank you for having me. This is a little bit of a turnaround, you interviewing me, but thanks for having me on.
It's my pleasure. I know I've been on your show so many times, but it's a real pleasure to have you here. So, Alan, I would love for you to kind of introduce yourself to our audience here. Like, a lot of people know you, but you do so many things and you have so much experience. Like, I'd love for you to share that with our audience.
Sure. Thank you. So, as the title under my name says, I am the CEO of Media Ops, and Media Ops are the people behind DevOps.com, Security Boulevard, Container Journal, TechStrong TV, Accelerated Strategies Group, the DevOps Institute, and more. But beyond that, Ashish, I've spent the last 25 years or so in the cyber and technology infrastructure space. I've co-founded and helped found a number of companies that played in this role, and over that time, I've had a real catbird seated to the evolution of our industry. All the way through. And it's actually one of the big reasons I founded DevOps.com is I thought it was a great thing for security. So as I sit here today, looking back, it's been a long, strange trip.
Thank you, Alan. That's certainly a very impressive resume, to say the least. But, a real pleasure to have you here. You also founded 2 software security companies in the past, and
Yes.
you know this field really well. So, as you're familiar these days, every day there's a new headline. This cybersecurity accident, that ransomware, people's data being, held hostage, organizations actually paying ransom to, get their data back and, just be secure again. So in today's cybersecurity, crisis environment, what's your advice to security leaders to address this huge crisis? How do they protect their organization, their apps, their data? Like, the game has changed right now. Like, there's the good versus bad, like the skill set is, always been erased, but it seems like maybe the bad guys are getting just a little bit ahead.
I don't know if they're getting ahead, but there's more of them and they're doing more. I mean, you know, Ashish, I just had this conversation with some CISOs I was interviewing. Security is more complex today. I think in times past, you know, you were a network security person or perhaps a application security or endpoint security person. But today, the complexity of these security fields and the attack surfaces and the vectors and methods have multiplied so much that it's made the security job that much harder. We need new technologies. We need new ways of looking at security. API security, for instance, something that Traceable is all about. You know, we weren't talking about that 10 years ago because we didn't have as many APIs. But now, you know, the API and API interfaces and interactions represent a huge attack surface that if we don't do something about, you know, we're locking the door but leaving the windows open.
Thanks for sharing that, Alan. We see the crisis. We see lots of people trying to address that. It's new methodologies, new tools, new processes, you know, new types of roles, et cetera, which brings me on to ask you, like, you know, organizations are getting really fast with like developing and releasing software, making security run with them as hard as well, right? Because you don't want to be behind on that. But for the past few years, you know, developers have always been outside this security circle of trust, right? They don't trust much what developers are pushing, and they want to check everything, and they want to, you know, quote unquote, slow it down, as we classically hear. But some DevOps teams are completely shifting this model. How do you see this changing where we're talking about DevSecOps and shift left security, and, you know, where security tools are now becoming developer centric and vice versa? Like, how do you see this trend evolving? You live and breathe this every day. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this.
Yeah. So Ashish, I mean, truthfully, this is the reason I started DevOps.com. It's the reason I got into DevOps. Historically, security was not part of the development team. Security was not even really part of the IT team in many organizations, right? But DevOps and the DevOps methodology and frameworks and Agile have given us another opportunity to integrate security into the development and release lifecycle. It's been come to be now called shift left, right? We're shifting security left. We're bringing security and making it everyone's responsibility. I think it's been a fundamental change over the last 5 years that I, in some small way, have helped, right, bring to the forefront with many of the activities we do. But it fundamentally changes the game, because if we can create more secure software, we'll have more secure software. If we can test before deployment for security, our deployed software will be more secure. It's not the be all and end all, though, right? There's plenty that happens post deployment. There's other factors at play. But this whole shift left DevSecOps movement has been a huge help. It has made real, you know, tangible differences in the quality of the software that we see being deployed.
Thank you, Alan. And thank you very much for being on our webcast today. It's been a real pleasure. I would like to, you know, get on to our next guest, and your insight today has been really valuable. I hope our readers kind of like, you know, take your advice, think about it, and, you know, think about how they adopt security software in this rapidly changing world today.
Thank you
again for joining us. And now I'd like to invite Jyoti back to the webcast. Jyoti, if you're there, like, thank you again very much for sharing your vision today. And, you know, we heard all our customers. And now I'd like to invite Jyoti back for, you know, the last part of this webcast to hear your thoughts.
Thank you, Ashish. And thank you, everyone, for being a part of this launch today. Hope you all enjoyed the webcast today. I would encourage all.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I think we're having some technical difficulties. Jyoti, if you're there, do you mind coming back on and giving us? I'll go to live Q&A from here. I'd love for you to kind of like summarize what you heard today, and then like we'll go to Q&A. You're on mute. Jyoti?
I think that's a key phrase for 2021.
Yes, you're on mute. That's the key phrase. Thank you, Ashish, and thank you everyone for joining us today here. And as you have heard, we are very excited to announce today's availability of the Traceable free plan here. And we really think we can create this kind of a large community of users, of product security, application security, developers, all coming together in this kind of a shift left DevSecOps kind of manner, and create visibility and awareness around API security in a much broader way than it has happened before. We strongly believe, that people have to secure their code, people have to secure their APIs, and people have to bring in everyone together. And we are very excited to announce this today. And thank you so much for joining us today as well.
Thank you, Jyoti. I want to start by again reiterating what Jyoti is saying, which is, thank you very much for taking some valuable time and joining us today. We had a couple of guests who had to drop out because of the length. So, thank you for staying on. So I have a few questions coming in from the audience. I'm going to try to pick a couple of them. And let's start with Upendra. Right, Upendra, there was a question here that says, as a chief security officer, have you faced issues when you try to evangelize or sell API security internally in your organizations, and how have you approached that?
Yeah, thank you so much, Ashish, for that question. You're absolutely right. I mean, API security is a new field, like Alan was mentioning. People don't have idea as to how to think about API security. And another thing is, when people think about APIs, they always think about east-west, north-south traffic than east-west traffic, right? So there is an education moment for our entire organization where we need to educate the team members that APIs has been in the industry for quite some time. Even post API, there is get APIs. All these APIs at a technical level are APIs. And when we are talking about north-south traffic, in addition to east-west traffic, we need to make sure that we have to secure it. So typically when we sell this in the organization, we have to prelude with some education moment to the organization. And there is a building of the case in the sense that, hey guys, if we have this traceability over there, observability, then we can create a protection layer as well. So, having that shift left, we were talking about Ashish previously, how do we go all the way shift right and then come back again? So that's the conversation typically organization and CISO leaders need to have.
Oh, thank you very much on that. On that note, I asked a few of our guests. I would love to get Alan's perspective on this. Alan, you've been in this industry for quite a while, and you've founded 2 security companies before, as we talked about it. What's your opinion on a free kind of offering where people can take and look at how to approach API security? How's that going to shake up the approach to API security? You're mute, Alan. Can't hear you. Sorry.
Apologize. Also, so I wonder why it hasn't happened before, quite frankly. There's such a rich history of free and open source security tools going back to Nessus and Snort and Nmap and, some of the folks who've been, I see Sanjay shaking his head. He remembers that stuff. But really, what we've seen with the opening of things like the CNCF and the cloud native movement is the real fruition, the real blooming of open source, where fundamentally the way people digest technology solutions today is, as I said, you deliver it into people's hands, you deliver delight, and if they like what you've given them, they buy it. They buy it in enterprise quantities. You don't need to necessarily go to the CISO or the CIO and wine and dine them and take 9 months to sell something. You get it in the user's hands. And I think that's the way, not just API security, all security and most software. well, not all security, but most security and most software is sold and delivered today.
Alan, I have a question here that is interesting, and I'm going to direct it to Sanjay, because what you just said, and I think we talked about it in the webcast. Somebody asked me, like, I like what Traceable is doing, but free often sometimes can denote something that doesn't have much value because you're giving it away for free. In the field of security, like, how should I think about this? Do you think this is going to create a perception that free isn't good enough? So maybe Ralph and Sanjay, I'd love to hear both of your viewpoints, because Sanjay, you're the architect behind this, and Ralph, you have invested in the company. Like, how do you both kind of see that statement?
Can I jump in as someone who's as a software buyer? I totally disagree with that mindset. I think it may exist, perhaps in enterprise software and so on. But for me, working for a, forward-thinking tech company, we use a lot of open source. We see a lot of progression from, free products to paid and so on. And so there's no differential in value. Like, we're just analyzing a product to see what it gives us, how well built it is, how effective it is, and pricing. I mean, it's important in the long term, but it's certainly, that concept of free being lower value for a company that's so heavily reliant on open source. I mean, that's just inconceivable to me.
Agreed.
Sanjay, you have any thoughts on that? Or Sanjay, just, I think.
Yeah, I'm having some video issues, but anyway, regardless, that's another line, Alan, maybe. Video issues, mic issues,
Yes.
whatever. We're all going to be having all of that. So
Yep.
anyway, so no, I think I agree with Ralph. So like, if you look at our solution that we are offering, we are providing a lot of the functionality as part of the product, and that's going to be available for free. And if you look at the overall product as well, there is a lot of pieces of functionality that we have open sourced as well. If you look at some parts of the distributed tracing technology on which the product has been built, we have open sourced it. So if you look at the functionality itself, I don't know if you guys looked at it when we were actually sharing this through in terms of all of the different functionality that's coming through as part of the free version. But let me just bring it up so we can look at this. We are including all of the API discovery functionality, the DNA aspects of it, the insights that we grab from the API, the risk monitoring aspects of it, the basic protection that's available as part of the product, vulnerabilities, all the perf metrics that we're capturing around it, which are weak indicators of compromise, and the basic threat blocking aspects of it. So it's a complete solution from a commercial perspective, which is being offered for free now, right? So that's where we are looking at this as a very end-to-end solution that's going to enable a lot of the DevSecOps activities to make them unlock their understanding of API security. Jyoti, anything to add to that?
Yeah, no, I would 100% agree with what you guys said. What Ralph said, like, free and open source is the way most developers and engineers and technical products are evaluated. Like, that's how people figure out, like, does this product work for them? How is it built? How is it architected? How is it designed? And by the time you want to have a sales and marketing conversation, you people have already tried and used the product. That's a feature of how all technical products, developer, DevOps products, have been sold, and most of the security products will move there as well. I wasn't actually aware that the security has such a rich history of free and open source back in the day as well. So I'm glad that you are bringing it back to it. To me, it's the best way to get your product out there is to get in the hands of the end users and see if the end users like it. If they like it, they want to use it. That's the best, right?
Yeah, one thing I'll tell you is don't take our word for it. Just come in, sign up, and what we are saying, under 10 minutes, if you're able to deploy in the environment, so a lot more environments will be added. If not, personally reach out to Jyoti and I, we will respond to you.
All right, so I'd love to wrap up the Q&A with one question, which is mine. It's not from the audience, that I'd love for everybody to kind of answer, right? If each of you had one key message for, like, the different teams in the organizations, you still have this tension, even though DevSecOps has advanced quite a bit. Like, dev kind of producing code that security is looking at it from one perspective. Dev wants to push faster. Dev has its own innovation kind of pressure to push out more features. Like, what's the one key message you want to leave with organizations that have to deal with security today. Like Upendra, you and Ralph, you're looking at this every day, managing your organizations. Alan, you talk about DevOps and security. I'd love to hear all five of you. Like one key quick message for our audience.
Yeah. So my thinking, and sorry, Ralph and Alan, for going first, but my key message to the entire audience is that security is an industry problem right now for all the countries, and we have to join hands. API security is real. Give this freeware a shot first, and then if you like it, go for the other license. So go with that attitude that this is real problem that Traceable is trying to solve.
I'll jump in next. My thing is much more tactical than Upendra. I think it's like you can't fix the problems that you don't know are there, right? And I think the thing that is exciting to me about this kind of technology is just having the visibility over data security issues and so on. And I think that the way that this is being developed is potentially transformative for an organization.
Should I go?
Yeah, sure.
So I think both Upendra and Ralph have said important things. I think what you've heard today. Here's the most important thing I want people to take away from this. I don't care whether you're in dev, ops, security, IT, or somewhere else. You are using more APIs than you think right now in your organization. And the first step, right, is the 12-step program. The first step is understanding how many APIs you're actually using, where they are. Because you can't secure what you don't know. So no matter where you are in the organization, try to get a handle on your API usage. And once you do that, I'm pretty sure it's going to open your eyes as to why you need an API security solution.
Thanks, Aaron. Jyoti and
Yeah, I would I would agree with that. I think we heard all these phrases, shift left and shift right, in the talk today, right? And the reality is that we need to have this kind of a closed loop solution to security. Whether it's API security or or any security, but API security is even more because developers are core part of who are building the APIs and changing the APIs, and it's really the freedom for developers that's driving this kind of the explosion of APIs, right? That we want the developer velocity to go up, like internally and externally. How do you interact with other software systems and other developers? So you need APIs so that developers could be more free and could innovate faster. But then you have to have a sort of a closed loop approach to it, like which is how do you design the APIs to how do you test them, the security kind of challenges during a testing cycle. Then you want to go out in production, and in production you want to discover everything and see, like, is it everything working as designed, or like is and you have so many different developers that are bringing things together. So what happens in production could be different than what was designed. So discoverability, understanding the risk, how people really use it in the wild, any API, that's very important. But then you have to close the loop and feed that data back to the developers, right? So it's really that you want shift left and shift right both done, so that to have a full understanding of it. So that's I would say to any team, that's how you should be thinking about it, not like in different silos of which team it is. Is it dev? Is it DevOps? Is it SRE? Is it security? Is it product security? API security? We just need the industry has to look at it as a whole.
Thanks. And to wrap up with Sanjay. Sanjay, I'll modify the question slightly for you, right? Everybody talked about different teams.
Yeah, they've all taken everything. So anyway, let's
What should the leadership layer at the top do to encourage all the behavior we just talked about, right?
I think the honest thing here is one of the biggest reasons why we are putting out the free solution that way is so that they can encourage, even if there is not a budget line item for API security or understanding of APIs or whatever it is, from a security engineer's perspective and DevSecOps practitioner's perspective, they should encourage them to just go and try to understand API security, understand where the APIs exist. How are the APIs changing on a continuous basis? Because it's not enough if you're just deploying these APIs, but how are these APIs actually changing? What types of data is flowing through them? I think the main thing that the encouragement needs to come across the board is to understand APIs from the ground up, And that's what my recommendation would be to from a CISO's perspective and everybody else, to encourage their security engineers to answer these questions for themselves, right?
Thank you, Sanjay. I want to thank everyone here who attended and made this webcast successful. We had a lot of viewers. We had a little bit of technical kind of issues at the beginning with the resolution, but we solved it. Thank you again, Upendra, Ralph, Alan, Sanjay, and Jyoti. I'd like to wrap this up by encouraging everybody to kind of downloading and using the free tier. On my screen right now, I'll share like a QR code or the URL that you can use to download the software. Sorry, to sign up, right? I don't know. There we go. The QR code here. You can take a picture, or you can just go to traceable.ai/free security. Other than this, I'd love to ask all of you to engage with us on our social media channels. This week only, we just to promote this and to drive attendance to our Black Hat event that we are present at. We'd love for you to, follow us on social media, reshare our product launch announcement. And we're giving one daily prize every day this week. If you are at Black Hat, we are present there. We love forward to kind of meeting you there and answering more of your questions. Thank you, everybody. Good night, good evening, good afternoon, and good morning where you are, depending on the globe. Thank you. Bye-bye.